Hello, boys and girls. Mr. Lapointe here for your writing lesson. It is Tuesday, December 1st. And today's writing lesson, um, our goal for today is going to be to understand informational writing. And also, our success criteria is I can research and take notes. Okay, and then also I can use those notes to create my own writing. Okay, because we're not copying what someone else says, but we're using the notes taken from another author to then think about it in our head and create our very own unique writing. And that's what we're going to practice doing today, because you can never have enough practice taking notes, and then practice using those notes to draft your report. Okay. Another success criteria for today, because we're going to kind of do a double whammy here, is I can use, or actually, it's not that. I can find new vocabulary words, define them, and use them in my writing. Okay, so I always talk about your expert vocabulary or your academic vocabulary. Those are those big words that you see a lot in your mentor text. They're repeated a lot. They're often the titles or the subtitles in the informational books we're reading. And that's how you know it's expert vocab. Sometimes you come across one, even myself, that you don't know what it means. So we're going to practice not only taking notes and researching and then drafting, but how to come across a new word that we don't know the meaning of, and then define it and use it in our own writing. Okay, because then we'll be using the vocabulary of experts. So I'm going to look at my paper about Native Americans and westward expansion. Here's my introduction that I've got so far, but we're going to spend a whole day on that tomorrow. I'm going to fill in the Indian Removal Act. And I found some really good information on nationalgeographic.com that I'm gonna cite today, and I'm gonna use to take some notes. And I'm also gonna look for some of those expert vocabulary words to really beef up my writing. So I'm gonna go to my westward expansion resources, and there you will find Nat Geo, which is a very excellent site. And also Nat Geo is a great place to get information because they're considered an authority on historical topics such as westward expansion. And if they're an authority, that means like they know what they're talking about. And people, when they hear National Geographic, they know they can trust them and believe them. That's the type of sources you want to put in your writing so that people can trust you and believe you. So we're going to go to Nat Geo on our westward expansion resources document. And it's got a ton of great stuff, and I haven't seen it all, but a ton of great stuff about westward expansion. You can even search for a very specific topic that you have that you might not find. But when I scroll down here, I found stuff I was looking for, because I'm talking about, Native Americans during westward expansion, which involves the Indian Removal Act. Whoa, what do you know? Sounds like something I want to read, because that's the next subtopic I'm trying to find information for. So let's check that out. It says May 28th, 1830, Indian Removal Act. On May 28th, 1830, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act, beginning the forced relocation of thousands of Native Americans, what became known as the Trail of Tears. Okay, in this map here, it shows the routes that the 5 southeastern tribes that were forced to leave their homelands in the southeast and live in Indian Territory in what is now Oklahoma. And let's go on here. So here's our background info. I'm going to read that and see if I can find more things to put in my writing. And this seems to be talking about my topic, so I'm going to read here. I'm going to read this expert's words. I'm just going to split my screen so that way I can look at two things at once, or try to, anyway. So, anyway, the let's read on. So on March 28th, 1830, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act, beginning the forced relocation of thousands of Native Americans in what became known as the Trail of Tears. Well, first of all, before I put this in my own words, I think this is a word I might want to use. And I don't know quite what forced relocation means, but I think it's an expert vocabulary word because I noticed that they say it again somewhere down here. So they're saying it a lot, but also it's underlined. Huh. So I think that, not all books underline words, but when they do underline it or bold it, that means it's probably an important word. And I don't know what that is, but it sounds good and it's about my topic, so I think I'm going to use it. Well, let's figure out how to define it. Well, one way you could figure out how to define it would be by using context clues. So you could replace forced relocation with another word and see if it makes sense. You could say the Indian Removal Act began the party of thousands of Native Americans when what became known as the Trail of Tears. Well, no, I don't think party makes much sense because I know the Trail of Tears was bad, and I know that the Indians they were forced to move during that. So that one doesn't make sense. So let's try this. What if I say made to move? What if I replaced forced relocation with that? Would it make sense? Well, in 1830, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act, beginning the forced movement of thousands of Native Americans, what became known as the Trail of Tears. That makes sense to me. Okay, but luckily, I don't have to use context clues because I can look it up here. That's what you do if you can't look it up. I can click that, and it'll define it. And it says the forced relocation is the migration of people from one place to another as ordered by the government or international authority. So I'm actually going to put that in my glossary of terms, and I'm gonna find a way to use the forced relocation, and I'm going to do that right now. So let's go back up to the Indian Removal Act. And how am I going to say that in my own words? So on March 28th, 1830, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act, beginning the forced relocation of thousands of Native Americans in what became known as the Trail of Tears. Well, I don't want to say it the exactly same way, but I can say basically the same thing with my own words. So let's think. Well, we could say, what could we say? What could we say? Let's unbold it first. Well, we got to have the dates. You can't change that. So I might say on March, I know it's already starting off like theirs. I'm gonna totally mix it up here. I'm just gonna start it totally different. I'm gonna say the Indian Removal Act was passed by Congress on March. I want you to tell me if it's the same or different. March 28th, March 28th, 1830. Okay, let's see what they said. So on March 28th, 1830, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act. And mine says, or then theirs says on March 28th. I know. And so then mine says, sorry, the Indian Removal Act was passed by Congress on March 28th, 1830. So I said the same information, but I put it in my own words. Let's go back here. They also talk about how it became known as the Trail of Tears. So I need to say something like that. The Indian Removal Act was passed by Congress on March 28th, 1830. And now I'm going to say this act marked the beginning of the end for thousands of Native people. This act marked the beginning of the end for thousands of Native people who would later be removed, from their lands. But then that's where I'm going to go back to. Um, Hold on. I'm going to use forced relocation here. The Indian Removal Act was passed by Congress on March 28, 1830. This act marked the beginning of the end for thousands of Native American people who would later um, be removed from their lands and and forced to relocate. Yeah, that's not forced relocation, but it is forced relocate. I'm going to try to think if I can use that as forced relocation. So would later be removed from their lands and forced from their lands and made to complete. Here we go. A forced. Now I used it the way they did. Relocation. Okay, and I'm going to bold it. I'm going to define that in my glossary later. That's an expert word right there. Whammy. So we're going to bold that because now we're using expert vocabulary and I know what it means now. Okay, if you weren't able to look up what that meant, or if you weren't on Nat Geo and it didn't have it there for you, you could always type it right into the Google. Let's see, forced relocation. All right. For the forced relocation, Google says, or regroupment is the forced movement of entire communities, usually by a government, to permanent or semi-permanent sites, often directly or indirectly under the control of military units. So that's what it is. It's the forced removal of a people by the government, to put it in my own words. And I'm going to put that in my my glossary of terms. So you could say forced relocation. Now I need to relook it up again. Forced movement of entire communities. The forced movement of entire groups or communities to another area by the government. All right. Like that. Okay, let's go back up here and try to take some more notes and add some more writing to our document here. So we're still trying to add to our Indian Removal Act subtopic. So let's read on here on National Geographic. So not all members of Congress supported the Indian Removal Act. Tennessee Representative Davy Crockett was a vocal opponent, for instance. Native Americans opposed removal from their ancestral lands, resulting in a long series of battles with local white settlers. But the forced relocation proved popular with voters. It freed more than 25 million acres of fertile, lucrative farmland to mostly white settlement in Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, and Arkansas. Okay, sounds like a country song or a country band. But anyway, as I read that, I want to use ancestral lands. Okay, because that's a big academic word. I'm not sure what it means, so I could use context clues and just say their homelands, and that makes sense. But let's check out what the website's saying. Having to do with ancestors or historical background. Okay, so your ancestors are like your mom, your dad, and your great grandpa, and your great 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 grandpa, and your great 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 grandma. It's the people that came before you that gave birth to you and to your parents. And so if it's your ancestral land, to me, that means it's like land that's always been in your family. It's where your people are from. If it's your ancestral lands, it's where your great 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 granddaddy and grandma lived. So I'm going to put that in there as well. But let's get back to reading this because sometimes you got to read it over and over again until you start to understand it and then also try to put it in your own words. So this is not easy work that we do, but we do it well and we can do it. So I'm going to read it again. Not all members of Congress supported the Indian Removal Act. Okay, so not all of them supported it. Tennessee Representative Davy Crockett was a vocal opponent. That means he was against it. Obviously, Native Americans were against it. And then they had a long series of battles with local white settlers. Okay, it was popular with voters, so people liked it. And then it says it freed more than 25 million acres of fertile, lucrative farmland, a mostly white settlement in Georgia and those other southern states. So, how can I put this in my own words? Let's go back. And oftentimes, as I tell you, I don't look at the notes because then I have a tendency to copy it. I don't want to do that. So, I'm going to say, oh, and I just noticed where I can add ancestral lands first. Right here. This act marked the beginning of the end for thousands of Native people who would later be removed from their lands. Nope. We're going to say ancestral lands. Whoa. We're going to put that baby in our glossary of terms later. That sounds way better. Would be later removed from their ancestral lands and made to complete a forced relocation. See how much better that sounds? Sounds like an expert. And you need to sound like an expert because you're teaching us as the expert. So sound like one. Oh, and now we got to put it in our own words. So let me show you how to do that real quick. I'm going to say, well, I'm going to start off with talking about how it was popular with voters because I know that they did that second in that Nat Geo article. So I'm going to make mine different, but I'm going to say the same basic stuff, but different. So I'm going to say, while the Indian Removal Act was very popular with voters, not all members of Congress supported it. Supported bill, just say. That's what you call laws and stuff that the president passes. Not all members of Congress supported the bill. While the Indian Removal Act was very popular with voters, not all members of Congress supported the bill. Davy, they talked about how Davy Crockett didn't like it. I'm going to say it in my own words. Davy Crockett was a famous, Davy Crockett, we're going to say, comma, who was a famous mountain man, disagreed with the Indian Removal Act. Um, So Davy Crockett, who was a famous mountain man, disagreed with the Indian Removal Act. He chose to live as the natives did. Okay, that's saying it in my own words. So let's go back and take a look at it, and then we'll go back to my example. It was very popular with voters. Not all members of Congress supported the bill. Davy Crockett was a famous mountain man, disagreed with their Indian Removal Act. I'm going to say, for instance, or I'm going to say, for example, using a transition word like we did yesterday. He chose to live as the natives did. And then let's go back and finish it up here. I'm going to say, unfortunately, comma, there were, nope, unfortunately, the majority of settlers in America during this time wanted the valuable land and resources that lie in native soil. Okay. And now I'm even going to do a double whammy, triple whammy, because I'm not seeing this in our writing quite yet. But I'm going to cite a source. I'm going to add it to my bibliography. Okay, so I used Nat Geo. I need to cite them. I need to do an in-text cite and a bibliography. So let me show you how to do the bibliography. The bibliography right here. Well, we'll go down here to number 4 and we'll say we'll go back up here and it's called May 28th, 1830 Indian Removal Act. That's the title of the article, 1830 Indian Removal Act. Now we got to see who it's by, the author. So we'll scroll down. We'll go to credits. Writer Carl Sue. And it's from nationalgeographic.com. So let's go ahead and write that down. So Indian Removal Act, there's the title by Carl Sue. And then you're going to say retrieved from National Geographic.com on November 30th. Now I've decided my source because I've given them the name of the article, the author, and then the date I retrieved it and where I retrieved it from. Okay, if it's a book, then all you need is the author, the title, or no. Yeah, you need the author. I'm sorry, the title, author, and then book title. Sorry, I messed up again. Title, and then the author of the book if it's just a book. All right. But we got this one from Epic. And so if you get it from a website, you always want to say, here's the website I got it from, by saying retrieved from biography.com or retrieved from epicbooks.com. And here's how we do our in-text citation. I'm going to go back and see what Carl Sue said about my topic. Well, over here, Carl Sue talked about how it's popular with voters because it freed more than 25 million acres of fertile, lucrative farmland to white settlement in Georgia and those other states. So I'm actually going to quote that. Okay, and here's where you can copy and paste, but if you're not sure how, I wouldn't do it because it's dangerous. But I know how to do it and give credit. If you're copy and pasting to give credit, that's fine. I hate to almost tell you to copy and paste at all because I'm worried that some of you will do it the wrong way. You can copy and paste when you're using a direct quote, like I'm doing now, but you have to say in your writing, this is what this person said. Watch me as I do this. So I'm going to copy it to save time. And that's okay because I'm giving them credit. You'll see. So I'm going to go down here where it talks about how the white people wanted the valuable land and resources that lie in the native soil. Well, I'm gonna have Carl back me up, Carl Sue from Nat Geo, by talking about what resources were there, like the farmland and the gold. So right after that, I'm just gonna go bam, paste it. I'm gonna make sure it's the same format as everything else on my paper. So I'm gonna make sure it's times and then the correct size. Bam, there we go. I'm gonna put it in direct quotes. Watch me. Bam. Quote. Quotation mark. Bam. See that at the end? So I've got quotation mark here. I got quotation mark here. And that's what is boxing in Carl Sue's words that I'm going to give him credit for. So and it's also backing up what I said about how the white settlers wanted that land because of all the stuff it had in it, the valuable stuff. So after I talked about how people wanted the valuable land and resources that lie in the native soil, my words, now I'm going into Carl Sue's words. And then Carl Sue is going to back me up by saying it freed more than 25 million acres of fertile, lucrative farmland to mostly white settlement in Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, and Arkansas. And then what I can say there to give Carl Sue credit is writes Carl Sue of National Geographic.com. See that? So it's okay that I did a direct quote. That's how you do a direct quote. Put what the author said in quotation marks, the chunk that supports what you were saying and backs you up. And then at the end, you say, writes Carl Sue of nationalgeographic.com. That's an in-text citation, okay? So you want to give your author credit in two spots. Down at your bibliography, Carl Sue, National Geographic, and then you want to actually say it where you use their quote. I could have started that off by saying, well, like I did here. Instead of saying writes Carl Sue, you can have your dialogue tag at the beginning and say according to the authors at biography.com. And so you can introduce and give credit at the beginning or the end. It just kind of depends on what you're feeling. Okay, but anyway, just to break it down and give you a recap of all the things we're doing here, what the most important thing I want you to focus on is continuing to take good notes from good sources and then use those notes to create your own writing. And while you do that, find new vocabulary words, define them, and use them in your writing. Okay, and add them to your bibliography, not your bibliography, your glossary of terms. Okay, you're also going to want to make sure you add to your bibliography as well, where you give credit to other authors. Ancestral lands, I forgot to put that one in there. All right. Good luck. Do your best. And we'll see you later.